Today on What Went Wrong, what happens when you try to put a whole bunch of shit into one box? Hi, I'm Brent Mauser, and I've made over 40 feature films, and most of them took place in the same cinematic universe. We launched the cinematic universe technically back in 1997 with Blue Moon, and then Return to Innocence and Tag, because your character carried over from Return to Innocence, and since then, every movie's sort of been tied into one another, and they've got that continuous story arc. Underlying, and it's fun going back and watching, because I'm editing the Innocent Saga, to see things like the Night Watchman and the little lines here or there, the events that were mentioned and talked about in Innocent Saga, some 10 years later.
Well, the whole character, like Frank Murphy and Jack Hart and all these different characters, and Diane was a character of Jesus back in the early 90s that you wrote about, was Right Here Waiting.
Yeah. And my cinematic universe came to be because it really wasn't this cinematic universe. The closest they had come to was like the Frankenstein and the werewolf and the Mummy of the Universal days.
Right.
And they kind of been around, but they weren't really delved into.
You had certain like movies where you'd have like sequels.
Yeah. Yeah. And like a trilogy, like Star Wars was just a trilogy. It wasn't a cinematic universe.
Well, they had books, they did video games and stuff, but still.
Those continued to grow.
Droids, the cartoon, and stuff like that.
Yeah. But mine came about out of sort of necessity in terms more than wanting to build a cinematic universe, because I worked with the same people over and over and over and over again. Right. So it was like, well, instead of having these people play different characters and do different stories,
which makes no sense.
Let's just have them play the same characters and evolve. So it really just started being one character going from one movie to another, and it was the same character, same actor, same character. Right. And then it started to evolve. Once the Innocent Saga became what it was, I started building towards that. Right. But I'm watching, and we that's why when I hear, Marvel Cinematic Universe, first cinematic universe, been 2008, I say, no. We were doing that long before. But as having done a cinematic universe, it is. I watched them announce all the shows and movies that they're going to be doing, that Disney's going to be doing on Star Wars, and I'm just going, oh, you guys are so screwed. You guys are so screwed because you have no idea the continuity problems. Even Marvel, with as closely as they as good a job as they did, and they tried. You still had actors dropping out. You went from Edward Norton to Ruffalo. And then just little things that they had to drop, we're going to tease this, and then it never showed up. Because things evolve, and plus you bring other people into it, different directors. The greatest heresy ever was bringing Rian Johnson into the Star Wars universe.
Just whatever.
I
never seen
it. So trying to build a cinematic universe is not an easy thing, because you as the writer, if you don't care about it that much, you can go, forget about it. But you got to remember, you've got these scores of fans out there that hang on every word. And I was watching something on YouTube with them. For years, they've tried to figure out what was on Boba Fett's little LED readout, and now that the Mandalorian's out, people were able to zoom in and start figuring out what it is, because they make the costumes, and it's these tiniest little details that they want to hang on to.
If you don't care about your universe, no one else is going to care about your universe. If you show no care and no love, no one else will show you any care or any love. When you take the time and you make the effort to make your universe real, and that was one of the first things that Lucas did. We'd never seen space that was dirty. There'd never, all the shows we'd ever seen on space, everything looked like the way your mom cleaned the house before guests came over. Everything was just whatever else. And in Star Wars, there was like lying around. When you went to Mos Eisley, there was just stuff. The Dowager Queen was an old freighter slanted in the ground. There was just pieces of crap on the ground. There was just stuff. Because I hate to tell you, I'm going to tell you, everybody walk into your room and look around. There's just everywhere. You've got little things over here. You've got things there. You've got stuff. In a space movie, this would all be clean and spick and span. Look like a Japanese picture of a bedroom. Where you've got the wall and the thing and nothing else. It's like, how does people live like that? There's nothing. No, in the real world, there's stuff. And all of a sudden, George Lucas gave us a vision of a world that was old in space, a long time ago in a galaxy, blah, 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 blah. But more importantly, that there was just crap lying around. Now, the Star Destroyers were clean because it's a military vessel, totally different. But Mos Eisley, which is, the more wretched hive of scum and villainy, I was like, I've been a freight dog for quite a while. I've been to some wretched hives of scum and villainy. One of the places we used to go, we actually called it Mos Eisley because you've never seen a bunch of pilots and whack jobs in that place. I mean, I expected to see, Satan in the corner or because there was some lunatics in there. I mean, some straight lunatics. And, what we used to call Corrosion Corner in Miami, where there's all these little piece of crap airplanes just lying around. But Star Wars looked like that. And so George Lucas, in so many ways, gave us new visions of stuff. And when you do that, when you take your world and you make it real, well, now people want to know all the things about it, because it's no longer just like, oh, it's a military vessel with nothing on it. Firefly. All this crap around there. I'm looking at stuff going, because they use a lot. Apparently they went down to the old airline parts store, and we're just buying all kinds of crap and just jamming it in this thing. Because I'm recognizing parts and pieces of stuff, like, oh, that's a cart from a Stone, that's a cart from a DC-9, that's all this other stuff. That's a Pullman train car toilet that Mal's peeing in, But I know that stuff, but it made the world real. This became a real ship. It was something I was just watching on TV. Well, at that point, I want to know all about it. What about the engines and what about the stuff? I know the OT-3 didn't have Jeppesen engines because you never fly on those because they follow the sky, as Kaylee would tell you. But it became real. All that being said, if you make your world real, if you go through the process, if you go through the care, if you go through the mental exercise of making your world exist, well, all of a sudden people want to know what's in it. And they have to know the details. I want to know what that says because it has to say something because everything else is so real. And that is actually one of the things I guess you could say is a huge credit to the writers, the producers, and the actors, and everything else, because they've made a world that people care about. And that's hard to do. That is really hard to do. How many movies have been made and no one gives a
Yeah. One of the things that people would talk about when I was on the set of Innocent Saga was that they would say, I just don't know how you keep it all straight in your head. And that's because of exactly what you said. There is a world in my head, and I live in that world. When I'm not in this one and I'm driving and I'm thinking and imagining the next movie, I'm already in that world.
Yeah.
And there'll be times where I'm like, oh, and then I'll have Ruby do this. Oh, wait, I can't because Ruby is in Japan at this time. And I have all this continuity that I have to keep straight in my head. Yeah. And I'm able to do that on set too, at the drop of a hat, because it's like, oh no, DeMarcus will say, hey, can Ruby do this? Oh no, because that person's already dead. He's already killed that person. Oh, okay. Yeah. Because I've got that timeline in my head. I've got, who exists where. I've got which actor's playing which person. Right. So even if somebody does say, hey, what if this person does this later on? Oh, we don't work with them anymore. So, that character's gone.
They're a dick.
I heard Amanda's feeling so bad one time when she brought up the point of doing a backstory to Tara, and I was like, I don't know if anyone really wants to know about her backstory. And then 2 years later, I was making the ballerina because I was like, no, you're right. This is an interesting story. Yeah. So credit to her for being able to identify. No, she needs a backstory. Give her a backstory, and credit to her for fighting for that. Yeah. The downside to that, though, can be that you try to explain everything. Right. Some of the stuff that we've been talking today about, some behind-the-scenes stuff, just planning out things that are to come. It's sort of like, well, there'll be times like you say, you don't need to know that. And I'm in that mindset of, well, yeah, but I do. I'm the creator of the universe. I need to know why that is, what's going on, because somebody else will be kind of wondering that.
Right.
So it's hard to pull yourself away. You can get too involved in the universe, and you have to sometimes remember this is just a movie, and you're going to have to tell the audiences sometimes, hey, that's just the way it is. That's how, the X-wing flies. Period.
Yeah. Well, it's like what is it? The rules of the universe. There's certain universes, Star Trek, that explain everything. There's certain universes, Star Wars, that explain nothing. How do how does U.S. Enterprise go to warp? Oh, well, the dilithium crystals do this, and they have a field that comes around the thing. How does a X-wing go to hyperspace? Astromech calculation. You push the button, and away you go. Ta-da! Congratulations. It's never explained. They never talk about it. What is you start to get this stuff of what is hyperspace in the books or some of the other stuff, and it's been talked about. But if you try to look for it in any of the movies, no one ever explains what hyperspace is. And once again, talking about Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy up, apparently they never tried to figure out what hyperspace was when they made their number 8 movie. And Admiral Longneck McGee decided to hyperspace her ship into something, and no one explained to her, no, it doesn't mean the ship just actually goes really fast. The ship slips into a type of trans space. So the ship would get right next to the other ship, and it wouldn't go through it would just vanish. No one bothered to explain that to them. They never bothered to learn it, and I guess you could say here's a pitfall of this little world. If you don't understand the rules of someone else's universe and you try to film in it, you could f*** yourself pretty hard, because Rian Johnson f***ed himself hard with number 8 because he didn't understand the rules. He didn't understand the universe. He didn't understand how it worked. And so when he did stuff, all of a sudden the fans, who were the people who love it, who care about it, I want to know what this says. I want to know what Baby Yoda's name is. I want to know all this other stuff, And all of a sudden you do this, and we're all sitting there going, what the f*** just happened? Because it doesn't make any sense. It's like if you got into your truck and we're going to drive from San Antonio to Austin, and you ended up just like flying off into space somewhere because no one understands, in the movie of my world, no one understands how a pickup truck works. It's just one of those things where if you don't understand how and why and other kind of stuff. That being said, if you don't understand your own rules, you run into problems. If you don't understand someone else's rules, you run into problems. But don't think that you have to create rules for everything, because you don't. And that's another thing we talked about.
Yeah, and you can get yourself into a lot of trouble in those ways, because it's not a real universe. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have the laws of physics and all those laws of reality that exist in ours that force one thing not to happen because physics.
Right.
In your head, in that imaginary world, anything can happen. So you can write yourself into a contradiction.
Right.
Because the universe isn't going to fix itself.
Right.
Because there is no universe.
Right.
So you have that stuff that will contradict each other. So the best you can do is some of the stuff that I've had to do is in retconning some stuff. Just, oh, well, this actor played that character in this movie, but a different actor played this character in another movie. How do I explain that? Oh, and then you bring in the multi-universe theories, and you can retcon it. And that's coming back to later down the road.
Right.
You.
And another thing, once you start doing that, then you will do. It's what we call the Bond future tech.
Yeah.
How does stuff work in the Bond future tech world? It just does. How can they have an ejector seat in a thing? Oh, they just can't. And Star Wars or Star Trek, all the stuff that doesn't exist. You have to do the future tech thing, which is to say it exists. Just here it is. What's a phaser? I don't know, but here it is. How does it work? It does this. How does Han Solo's blaster work? Watch, pull the trigger. And Greedo's dead because Han shot first. But it's one of those things where they don't have to explain it because it's not important to the story. Now, Star Trek, they have made it important to the story because they have to find new ways to try to destroy the Enterprise every month or every week. And to do that, you need to have all kinds of other stuff to go wrong. But you can't just say, the transporter's broke, so we're all dying in half an hour. What? That's stupid. Why do you do that? So you have to explain, it's this, it's tachyons, it's warp particles, it's this, it's that, and find new ways to, kill yourself and then save yourself and everything else like that. But in Star Wars, none of their plot devices transition or depend upon aircraft malfunctions or ship malfunctions. It's about the war. It's about the fight. No one gives a crap. I mean, yeah, the Millennium Falcon being, persnickety like it is and failing is a convenient plot device when you're being chased by Star Destroyers into an asteroid field. But the premise of what's happening is not that the Millennium Falcon doesn't work. And that particular thing, it wasn't working. R2 fixed it, and now it works fine. And it's never not worked since then. Just that one little section, Empire Strikes Back, for like an hour, where the Millennium Falcon was just f***ing everything up for everybody. And so they don't need to have all these weird, stupid things go wrong. So they don't need to explain how anything happens. You can get the source material. You can read the books. That's my problem, is that you leave me alone with books, I'm going to read them, and I'm going to remember almost everything, which is creepy and freaky, and I'm very sorry, but it happens. But as far as just enjoying the show, I do not need to understand how the Millennium Falcon flies in order to appreciate what's going on and to love what's happening and other things like this. If you've developed your world to depend upon a conflict as opposed to your ship screwing up all the time, you don't need to explain how your goddamn ship works. It works because I turned it on and took off. Congratulations. I mean, how many people flying on an airplane could tell you how the airplane works? Any of them? I bet I couldn't find 2 people on a passenger plane of 400 people who have any idea how anything is working on the airplane. Where's the air coming from? Do you have any clue where that's coming from? I want peanuts. They don't care because it's not in their little world, right?
Yeah.
So unless you make it part of your universe, where you're an airplane mechanic, so you have to know how this crap works, or you're a pilot, so you have to know how this crap works, then it's important to you. But if it's not, don't make it your problem.
Yeah.
Don't. Just don't.
Yeah. Now, especially when you've got Marvel or Disney trying to make these cinematic universes, you have this continuity that you have to worry about. Yeah. And especially if you're doing 3 or 4 at a time.
Oi.
How do you know that this one person who's making this movie over here is not doing something that's counter to another movie over here?
You got to have Bob. Want to talk about Bob?
I'll talk about Bob.
Okay, Bob is someone. If you're going to have multiple university thing, or Brett, but Bob, you're going to be Bob for this. And Bob is someone who you pay to sit in a room, and he's got every bit of source material, every book, every diagram, every schematic, everything that's ever been written or put on anything that has anything to do with anything about your world. And anytime you're going to write anything, whether it's a page or 100 pages or 300 pages, you write it and you give it to Bob and you leave Bob the fuck alone. You don't bother Bob. You don't talk to Bob. You leave Bob alone. And Bob will go through your script and will research and search and know and everything else of that. And if you have any issues, Bob will write on there, can't do this, cry to this, blah, 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 whatever else. And he'll give it back to you. And whatever Bob has said, you got to deal with because he's right and you're not. Because you're a director and he's the expert. Okay? Don't go against Bob. Just don't ever go against Bob. Okay? It's not going to be good for you. Because Bob is basically the fandom. Because Bob's job, it's Bob's job, is to do that. But the problem is, all the kids and the people and the stuff who have, real jobs or not have real jobs, but it's if you love the universe or you're like me and you just read stuff and it's stuck in your head forever, and you give me, Admiral Longneck McGee going, doing this thing and then destroying the Imperial fleet with a maneuver that makes no sense, we're all going to know. And the thing is, we're all going to tell you. And now with the advent of public media, we're going to tell you a lot. And you can get mad at us if you want, but the point is, you f***ed up. You put something into this movie that doesn't exist within the universe. You broke the rules of the universe. And we talked about what happens when you break the rules of your universe. Don't do it. The best way to do that is either have Bob or don't make rules of your universe that are so convoluted and difficult that you don't understand them.
Or that's going to carry over to 20 different films because you're going to change things.
If you're going to make this universe, it's going to exist unless you find some way to change your universe, which we can also talk about.
no matter who, how small your universe is in terms of publicity or whatever, people will notice those things.
Yeah.
You'd be amazed at, hey, wait, I thought this was that. And I've taken as much care as I possibly can to do that and
Right.
to maintain that continuity throughout loud. And it ain't easy, especially when we're at 40 films. Almost all of them. If not, because I'm over 40 films now. But
maybe like Bass Reeves is not.
There's actually been some sort of
Lord have
theory
mercy.
as to maybe this could fit in the Ponder's universe, because if you learn anything from being a popular movie or a movie that does have a fan base, that's what I think. What I wish the companies like CBS and Disney with Star Treks and the Marvels understand is that when your films reach a certain level, it's not yours anymore. It's ours.
Yeah.
Because it's part of our culture. It's part of I grew up, and Star Wars is a part of my life.
It's part of something that I remember my father and I doing. When you're with that, you're with my father and my memories.
Yeah.
And he's not around anymore, so I'm really gonna take that personally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I have memories of my mother was always the one that bought gifts and whatnot, and I remember being at a Safeway when I was knee-high to a grasshopper.
Yeah.
And just out of nowhere, my father. I sat in the car. My dad said, "Hold on a second," and he went back into Safeway and he came out and he had bought the Cloud City Princess Leia for me, a little action figure. Not something that he would do normally.
Right.
It was just one of those things. And when I sold a lot of the Star Wars action figures and things like that many years ago, I kept 2 or 3, and that was one of them that I was like, this has something.
It's not just. These characters are not just characters. To the Kathleen Kennedys and the Ryan Johnsons and the dumbasses at Disney, they may be just dollar signs to them, okay? Because they don't have any souls. They don't know any better. But to the rest of us who grew up with this stuff and who it meant something to us, to tell me that I'm wrong because I think what you're doing is up, to tell me that I'm a misogynist or I'm evil or something like that, the Force is female or whatever else, is like, the Force is the Force, and it's a part of a world that I grew up with, and memories of my childhood with my friends and my family and things that I did, and Christmases and birthdays and getting these toys and the X-Wings and the Y-Wings and when I was a kid, you came to my house, I had all these different I love the ships. Ships are my thing. I love, aircraft, all the different X-Wings, Y-Wings, B-Wings, and all that crap. I had that stuff. I had Millennium Falcon. I had the big one, the small one. I had an AT-AT that my great grandmother when she saw it, she's like, "Get that dog out of here!" It's a big mechanical dog, but it's part of my life. It's part of my family.
My mother knocked down a little old lady to get the last Millennium Falcon for Christmas one year.
Darn right she did.
And I actually wound up. I remember she had it in her closet and didn't wrap it yet. And little me wasn't even trying to snoop. I was just wandering around. I said, "Mommy, look, there's a Millennium Falcon!" And she was like, "I knocked down an old lady for this. This is going to be your Christmas present."
It's one of those things where, it may just be a movie to some people. It may be something like that, and I'm like that about a lot of movies. The Marvel Universe means nothing to me. I never got into it. I don't care. Is this person Spider-Man or the Hulk or what? Whatever. Yeah, I don't care. Star Wars, I'm not, despite the fact that I have Star Wars stuff and I know a lot about, I'm not a super fan, okay? But those memories, those movies are part of my memory. Those are part of my childhood and growing up, and they mean something to me. When I watched those guys, and I'm like I said, I forget what they call it, like a fringer. I'm on the fringe. Yes, I got Star Wars crap on, but I'm a fringer. I really am. When I watched the Mandalorian reactions, and some of these dudes were crying when Luke showed up, and I'm watching that going, oh my God, because it means so much to them. And it was also awful, and we talked about this, how horribly hurt they would have been. Because if it means so much to them that they're crying when they see Luke Skywalker showing up to them.
We saw Luke Skywalker for the last 3 movies.
Yeah.
Why weren't they?
They?
Because that wasn't Luke
Skywalker. You guys don't understand what you did. You gave us the character Luke Skywalker, but that's not who it was. This is the guy who went into the Death Star to save his father, knowing that it meant certain death. He should have died. He was planning on dying. In fact, at the end of the day, he throws his lightsaber away and stands unarmed in front of the Emperor, the most dangerous person in the universe. And he stands in front of him with not nary a weapon on him, crying out for the soul of his father. Okay? And he's just going to be like the way he was in those last three. Get the out. It's, like I said, I'm not a super fan, but I'm insulted that somebody would take something that means so much, like those guys who were crying about it, and would all over it like they did. Because Disney, and I'm a big Disney fan. I've had a season pass since I can't remember. I lived in Orlando. I worked for Disney. They all over everything they touch the past couple of years. I don't understand it. And once again, they all over their fans, and it was okay. But now all of a sudden with COVID, now the parks are locked down. No one can go to movie theaters. And all of a sudden, Disney is bleeding cash left and right. And now they need those fans. And where are they? Crickets. Nothing. It says you have to respect your fans. Because like you said, once it gets to a certain level, no longer belongs to you. I mean, the rights may belong to LucasArts, but screw you. This belongs to the people. This belongs to the fans. And I'm not a communist or a socialist in that way. I mean, your property is your property. But you have to understand, you have to respect what made you famous, what made this valuable, what made this important is the fans. And if you on the fans, when the time comes, like Disney's finding out, Disney's on the ground, bleeding to death, gunshot wounds and stab wounds from and the fans are standing over top of them going, that sucks. Don't you wish you had some help? And they walk away. And Disney's got no one to blame but themselves. And you, as a writer, as a director, as a movie maker, will have no one to blame but yourself if you make those same mistakes. Don't make them. They're easy to prevent. Well, let me rephrase that. They're not easy to prevent, but you need to take care to prevent them. Because if you don't.
Yeah. So if you don't have the patience, if you don't have, and you know whether you do or not.
Yeah, you know.
If you don't have the patience and that ability to just really look at the fine minutia,
right,
then don't get it in a cinematic universe.
I will not.
Because you're not, because it's when you create a cinematic universe, you're making a promise.
Yeah.
Don't break that promise to your fans.